Most luxury motorhome concepts try to impress you. This one makes you feel underdressed just looking at it. This is the LUXORA. And from the moment light hits that pearl white bodywork, you already know this is not a conversation about camping. This is a conversation about what happens when someone decides that a private jet lifestyle should not stop the moment you hit the road. Full transparency before we go any further. What you are looking at is an AI-generated concept. No factory, no showroom, no delivery date. Pure imagination. And honestly, that is exactly what makes it worth analyzing. Because when you remove every real-world constraint, what gets designed tells you everything about where luxury mobility is actually heading. Here is what we are doing today. We are walking every surface of this exterior, and there is a lot to unpack. We are deconstructing the interior from the proportions out, zone by zone. We are getting into the powertrain logic and the smart systems that would need to exist to make something like this real. And I am saving one specific detail on this concept, something about the way this roofline resolves at the rear, because it changes how you read the entire vehicle. We get to that at the end. Let us start at the front. That face. Let me just take a second with that face. The front end of the LUXORA is doing something I have not seen resolve this cleanly on a motorhome concept before. The lower fascia is a textured black panel, almost crystalline in its finish, like crushed carbon or fractured obsidian. And sitting dead center in that panel is a gold-winged badge that is backlit with the kind of subtle glow that makes you think it is generating its own light source. Above that, the LED daytime running light signature cuts sharp, diagonal lines upward toward the A-pillars, framing the entire front end in a V-shape that draws your eye up toward the roofline automatically. What that front end is communicating is very deliberate. It is not aggressive. The LUXORA X6 we looked at recently was aggressive. This is something different. This is composed, confident without raising its voice. The design language being spoken here is closer to a Rolls-Royce Spectre than anything from the RV world, and that is not a comparison I make lightly. You would recognize this thing from a kilometer away, and it would not be because it is loud. It would be because it is completely, utterly resolved. The windshield is massive. Panoramic does not cover it. The glass wraps wide into both A-pillars, giving the driver a visibility envelope that most Class A motorhomes simply cannot match. Combined with what appears to be a flush integrated camera array across the front bumper line, the LUXORA is imagining a driving experience where the technology is doing as much work as the driver. This is the autonomous highway motorhome concept executed with visual elegance rather than visual aggression. Now step back and look at the profile, because this is where the LUXORA makes its real argument. The silhouette is clean in a way that is genuinely hard to achieve at this scale. The roofline rises from that panoramic windshield and holds completely flat, not a curve, not a taper, all the way to the rear. That flat roofline is a statement. It is saying, every centimeter of vertical space inside this vehicle has been protected. No aerodynamic sculpting that steals headroom. No dramatic rear taper that compresses the sleeping zone. A flat roof on a motorhome of this length means you are walking upright from the cockpit to the rear wall. That is the promise. The body panels are white, and not a standard white. This is a pearlescent finish with a depth that shifts between bright silver and warm cream, depending on the angle of light. In this showroom environment, it is doing extraordinary things. Every body panel crease catches a slightly different tone. The effect is that the vehicle looks carved rather than manufactured, like someone took a single block of material and subtracted everything unnecessary. The graphic language running along the lower body is black, deep, matte black cladding that creates a two-tone division between the upper pearl bodywork and the lower chassis section. That division is doing two things simultaneously. Visually, it lowers the apparent center of gravity, making a vehicle this tall read as more planted than it actually is. And practically, it signals that the lower section is where the serious mechanical business happens. Wheel arches, storage bays, chassis rails. while the upper section is where the living happens. That is smart visual communication. The wheels. Multi-spoke black alloys with gold detailing at the center, and look at the diameter. These are large wheels, low-profile tires, polished lip finish. This is not an off-road wheel choice. This is a grand touring wheel choice. The LUXORA is not trying to go where roads end. It is trying to redefine what the road feels like. That distinction matters when we get to powertrain. The rear axle configuration is a tandem, dual rear wheels on both sides, 6 wheels total. That tells you everything about the gross vehicle weight this concept is imagining. You do not run tandem rear axles unless you are managing serious mass. And serious mass means serious interior volume. We are going inside now, and I want you to hold that thought. There is also something happening at the roofline transition toward the rear that I want you to keep in mind. I am not getting to it yet, but it is the detail I would show in a design school critique as the single decision that elevates this concept above everything else I have seen this year. We get there at the verdict. We do not have interior renders for the LUXORA, so we do what we always do on this channel. We use the exterior as our evidence, and we work out what is almost certainly happening inside. This is detective work, and honestly, it is the most interesting part of the analysis. Start with ceiling height. That roofline, measured against those wheel diameters as a scale reference, puts interior standing height somewhere between 2.3 and 2.5 meters. That is not motorhome height. That is residential ceiling height. You are not ducking, not hunching, not feeling like a guest in a space that tolerates you. You are living in something that was built around the human body at full extension. The habitable length on a tandem axle platform of this wheelbase, and I am estimating total vehicle length at around 12 to 13 meters based on those proportions, gives you somewhere between 8 and 9 meters of interior living space once you account for the cab and mechanical sections. That is a serious number. For reference, a premium hotel room in a 5-star property is typically 35 to 45 square meters. At this width and this length, the LUXORA is imagining an interior that competes with that. On wheels. Here is how I think the designer intended that space to be divided. The cockpit sits behind that panoramic windshield. And at this scale, the cockpit is probably a transitional zone, not just 2 seats and a dashboard. I would expect a lounge-forward configuration where the driver and front passenger are integrated into the living space rather than separated from it. No bulkhead, no partition. The windshield becomes the front wall of the living room. You drive this concept the way you sit in the observation car of a luxury train. The landscape is part of the interior experience. Behind the cockpit, a central social zone, lounge, dining, the heart of the space. This is where the full-length panoramic side windows are doing their work. Natural light running the length of the vehicle at that glass-to-body ratio means the living area would feel completely different from anything you have experienced in a conventional Class A motorhome. It would feel bright, open, like the outside is a wall hanging rather than a boundary. Moving toward the rear, the kitchen, on a platform this wide, and I am estimating interior width at around 2.4 meters. You have room for a genuine residential kitchen configuration. Not a galley. A kitchen with an island. Induction cooking, full-depth refrigeration, counter space that actually exists. The white-on-white design language of the exterior almost certainly continues inside. I would expect lacquered cabinetry, backlit surfaces, integrated appliances that disappear into the walls when not in use. The sleeping zone sits at the rear, above that tandem rear axle pair. Positioned here for 2 reasons. First, it is the quietest part of the platform, furthest from the powertrain, most insulated from road noise. Second, the rear position on a platform this long gives you the option of a full-width transverse bed. Not a compromise bed. A bed you bring from home. Floor-to-ceiling wardrobe storage on the rear wall. Blackout glass or electronically tintable windows for the side panels flanking the sleeping zone. The bathroom, and on a concept this size there is no reason for restraint. would almost certainly be a full wet room. Walk-in shower, full-depth basin, real fixtures. The kind of bathroom that makes hotel rooms feel like an afterthought. The smart systems running all of this are where the LUXORA makes its most forward-looking argument. Learning climate zones that adjust automatically as the vehicle moves between environments. Starlink connectivity as standard, not optional, not an upgrade. Integrated solar management reading the planned route and pre-optimizing battery charge cycles before you arrive at a destination. Autonomous highway assistance that manages motorway legs while the occupants use the living space the way it was designed to be used, as a living space. This is the direction full-time RV living is going. And the LUXORA is showing you what the destination looks like. Let us talk powertrain. Because the wheel choice we noted on the exterior, large diameter, low-profile Grand Touring tires, is telling us something important about how this concept intends to move. This is not an overlanding machine. This is a long-distance Grand Touring motorhome. And that distinction completely reframes the powertrain logic. In a real-world build scenario, full electric makes the most compelling case at this positioning level. Not for environmental reasons, though that is part of it, but for experiential reasons. A vehicle this refined, with an interior this resolved, cannot have a diesel engine bleeding noise and vibration into the living space at motorway speed. The silence of electric propulsion is not a technical specification on a vehicle like this. It is a fundamental part of the product. If this were engineered for production, you would be looking at dual electric motors, one per rear axle, with combined output somewhere north of 700 horsepower. Not because this vehicle needs to be fast, but because at a gross vehicle weight that tandem rear axle configuration implies, you need that output headroom to maintain effortless progress, to feel like the road is irrelevant. That is the Grand Touring promise. Battery capacity on a platform this large, and using current heavy EV coach technology as the reference point, you are looking at a 600 to 800 kilowatt-hour main pack. Real-world range in the 500 to 600 kilometer territory at motorway speed. Enough to cross from London to the south of France without a charge stop. That changes the conversation about what full-time RV living actually looks like when the vehicle is electric. The rooftop solar array, those flush integrated panels we see running across the flat roofline, are not doing the heavy lifting on range. They are the off-grid system sustainer. Climate control, lighting, connectivity, refrigeration, all running off solar generation while the vehicle is parked. So when you stop somewhere for 3 days without a hookup point, you lose nothing. The experience inside the vehicle does not degrade. That is the off-grid luxury proposition done correctly. Autonomous highway mode. That camera array across the front fascia, the sensor suite implied by this level of concept resolution. This vehicle is imagining a world where the long motorway legs run themselves, where you transition from driver to passenger the moment you hit a controlled access road, and you walk to the back of your own living room and have breakfast while the landscape moves past the panoramic windows. That is not science fiction. That is 2026 technology applied to the right platform. All right, the LUXORA. Here is my honest read. What it does genuinely well is restraint. That sounds like a strange thing to say about an AI-generated luxury motorhome concept, but it is the most precise compliment I can give it. Every other concept in this space reaches for drama, for aggression, for maximalism, for features that announce themselves. The LUXORA reaches for composure. The pearl white finish, the flush surfaces, the gold accents that whisper instead of shout. This is a design team that understood that at this positioning level, restraint is the most expensive thing you can put on a vehicle. What seems impractical is the tire choice. Low-profile Grand Touring rubber on a tandem axle platform, this heavy creates a ride quality problem that no suspension engineering fully solves. The sidewall flex you lose with low-profile tires is the sidewall flex that absorbs the road imperfections your suspension misses. At 13 meters and this estimated curb weight, Those tires would be delivering feedback into the cabin that conflicts directly with the refinement promise of everything above the wheel arches. In a production version, I would run a taller sidewall and accept the visual compromise. The living experience demands it. The most impressive detail, and here is what I have been holding back, is the roofline transition at the rear. Look at the way the flat roof does not simply terminate. It curves downward in a single radius sweep that wraps into the rear fascia. That radius is consistent with a rear overhang designed to conceal a deployable element, either a full-width awning system or, and this is the reading I find more interesting, a fold-down rear terrace. A deployable outdoor deck accessed from the rear of the vehicle that extends the living space outside the footprint of the motorhome when parked. That single detail, if my reading of those proportions is correct, transforms the LUXORA from a vehicle you live inside to a vehicle you live around. That is a fundamentally different product, and it is the most resolved version of that idea I have seen in this format. One thing I would change, the front badge. The gold-winged emblem is beautiful in isolation, but against that textured black fascia panel, it almost disappears in certain lighting conditions. The concept deserves a badge that holds at every angle, in every light. I would recess it, backlight it more aggressively, and make it the first thing your eye finds when the vehicle enters the room. Because everything else about this front end earns that kind of entrance. What the LUXORA signals about where luxury mobility is heading is this. The conversation is no longer about how big the television is or how many USB ports are in the kitchen. The conversation is about silence, about light, about the feeling of moving through the world in a space that was designed with the same intention as the best architecture on Earth. The LUXORA is a fictional concept. It is AI-generated. It will never be built. And it is still the most elegantly resolved motorhome concept I have put in front of this camera. Now, deployable rear terrace or panoramic sunroof that runs the full length of the living zone. If you could only have one on your dream off-grid luxury build, which one is it and why? Tell me below. I read every single one. If this kind of analysis is what you come to YouTube for, concepts taken seriously, broken down honestly, no hype, subscribing is the most efficient way to not miss the next one. See you there.